Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm really excited tonight. Tonight's guest, I've known him a very long time. He was a standout athlete at Shelton High School in both basketball and baseball. He would go on to have a successful college career. He's been a success his whole life, and it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you Mr. John Ribas. And John, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. It's a real honor.
No, it's an honor to be here, Mike. Thank you. Obviously, I am also a fan of the show and fan of you for a long time. We go way back to when we first met Three Saints Park, and I don't even know what you want to the 80s, 90s. I can't remember now. It's going so far back.
And it's funny, John. I look back on those years, especially the summer camps and stuff like that. Those Three Saints Parks baseball games were the best. I mean, just a great time. And I mean, that's pretty much the type of childhood you had. So let me ask you, how did the love for never mind basketball or baseball, but just sports in general begin for you?
Um, Probably at the boys' club. I mean, my dad being the director there for so long, my brother and I spent a lot of time there, and being there has every sport under the sun that you can play. I mean, basketball, baseball is the tip of the iceberg, but I mean, it's kickball, football, all the table games that they have there. So, I mean, we grew up entrenched in it. My neighborhood somewhat too. We had a good neighborhood full of kids, some of whom went to the club, some of whom didn't. But we would play here too. I don't know. I felt like we had a lot more freedom back then to kind of wander the neighborhood, do what we wanted to, ride our bikes, go to fields. I feel feel like I wouldn't let my kids do the same things my parents let me do 30 years ago.
Right. And let me ask you, John, did you have a certain athlete that you idolized as a young kid? I mean, I know you were a big New York Yankees fan. I mean, was there a particular player that stood out to you where like the love of sports really started to grow?
I think at first I was a big Larry Bird guy. I mean,
Mhm.
anyone who knows me knows I was never shy of a gun in threes. So, I mean, that probably shocks no one, although he was a much better passer. And, baseball wise, I was always a big Jeter, Mariano guy. That was a little later. Don Mattingly before that. So those kinds of players. I like those Phillies teams too from like the early 90s. They were all a bunch of crazy people. Dykstra and John Kruk. Not that I
Right. Often.
modeled my game off of any of them, but they were just fun to watch and fun to root for, in my opinion.
Right. And I think in the late 80s, John, baseball was, I mean, baseball has always been big, but I mean, it was so much more popular then because it started to grow where it was on NBC, ABC, ESPN got into the game with it as well. So, I mean, you got to see so many great players, but you also got to watch baseball all the time in the summer. And I really believe that's where the love for so many kids with baseball begins is when they're just watching these players on TV and seeing the things these guys do.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely part of it. It was more widespread. Part of that too was like trading cards, right? I mean, I feel like that same time period, late '80s, early '90s, was a very popular time for card shows and card stores and tops and Fleer and packs of cards and things like that. So I remember actively trying to get certain cards, certain rookie cards. God, I wish I had some of them still, kind of thing. But that was also another just source of it, baseball especially.
Right. So, how old would you say when you first started playing basketball? Would you say like 6 or 7 years old?
Yeah, probably,
Yeah.
probably. I think it would go back to then when we first started playing Mighty Mites, things like that. Same with baseball, t-ball. I think it all starts around the same age, 6, 7 years old, when you can finally reach certain height rims or throw, catch, without being afraid of the ball. That's I think the beginning of it for most kids.
Now, some of the people I've had on my show, John, when I talk to them about playing basketball for the first time, they would always, a lot of them would comment how they didn't like it the first year as much because they're learning the game. They have to really get adjusted to the drills and everything like that. But as time went on, they grew to love it. I mean, did you enjoy it right away, or was the first year kind of a struggle for you?
It was probably a struggle. I mean, I don't recall specifically, but I can't imagine that at that age, coordination it takes a long time to catch up. So, I mean, it was many hours in the driveway and at the in the gym that I really started to become addicted to it. Especially probably in my early teen years.
I'm glad you brought up the driveway, John, because I think that's a, a key to so many kids developing and the good players and things like that. It's the extra time you put in outside of practice and the games and stuff like that when you're home and you're just shooting outside with your brother or your sister or your dad, whatever it might be. That's what kids do. They're playing outside there. So I think that's really big for any kid because the more you're out there shooting, the more, number one, you love the game, but two, you're really getting better as each day goes on.
For sure. I mean, and I would be the first to say I spent countless hours out there shooting, dribbling in the snow, in the rain, uncomfortable when it was hot. That was a great thing about where I grew up. My driveway specifically flat, large. My dad put in a hoop when we were young, and we used every inch of it until it collapsed. So, that was something we spent a lot of time doing, and it definitely was. We got a lot better there, and had a lot more hours there than I could have had anywhere else.
Now you mentioned your dad, John. He coached you quite a bit in Biddy, correct?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, he definitely coached the team, and which is probably not an easy thing to do, coaching your own kids, but he did it when I was younger. But that faded once I probably got to 11, 12 years old. Other people took over. He might have coached my brother, who was about 18 months younger, so passed the torch down to him, and then after that, he was just a spectator.
Yeah, and I mean, he also would over the years when he coached, he would take kids on different tournaments. I know he took kids to Massachusetts. I even think New Hampshire. So he really enjoyed coaching not only his kids, but he just enjoyed coaching basketball in general.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, and long before I ever came along, I think he coached kids, for the club and their travel teams and their various programs for years before that. So I think the coaching years for me were probably the end of his coaching days, and then was happy to sort of be on the sideline at a different capacity.
Right. You mentioned about the Boys and Girls Club, John, and you were very good at a lot of things. And I could think of ping pong, you were real good at. You were an excellent pool player, things like that. But how invaluable is the Boys and Girls Club for so many kids? Because you not only are you making friendships and you're building your confidence and stuff like that, but it gives you so many things that you could do when you're down there, and you get to learn a variety of games that you really enjoy. And I think about, I just mentioned ping pong. I think about that ping pong club that was done for many years by Pete Schold. And I mean, that was just a terrific program.
Yeah, yeah. What Pete did down there, I mean, he was an amazing player, and amazing players followed him to that program. I mean, I remember getting beat by a guy who was using a paddle that was about the size, of the ball itself, and beat handily. I mean, these guys and were no joke. But I spent a lot of time down there. It was natural with my dad's affiliation to it, so obviously we got the benefit of being able to go there, even when it wasn't open sometimes. And play the games, get good at the games, and that was our life, and it is important. I mean, I don't know. Um, the people that I know from there and knew from there, there's a different kind of fondness. It's like you're kind of in the trenches with them on a daily basis, whether it be camp or after school. It's different than other sort of friendships that you can form in life that you just are on a team with someone. It's a little more personal than that.
Yeah, exactly. So, John, let me ask you. I know, like with baseball, you start out with t-ball, then there's coach pitch, things like that. So you're probably like maybe 9 or 10 years old, where you're playing regular organized baseball. How old would you say you were when you started to pitch? I mean, was that right away, or did that take time?
No, it was right away. I don't think, and I don't recall if coach pitch was as much of a thing as it is now. My recollection is you kind of went t-ball to minors, and minors was sort of a player pitched in the wider strike zone, more errors, but you were on your own already at that point. But I think you had to be 8, 9 years old at then. And then I wanted to pitch right away and continued to do so all the way through college. But it definitely started when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. The second you were able to pitch as a player yourself without having to use a tee.
Yeah. Now, did you play a variety of positions in the field? I mean, was there a couple that you really focus on, or did at that age did the coach put you everywhere?
Yeah, you played everywhere early on. Get a taste of every position. As a right-handed thrower, I could play every position. I know a lot of lefty throwers are kind of categorically never play shortstop, third base, catcher. But I played third, short, outfield, pitcher. Pitcher was always my favorite, though. I mean, I love baseball, but it's obviously not the most action-intensive game, especially if you're playing like right field. So, as pitcher, you get to be involved in every play as long as you're in the game.
Right. So talk to me. I know it's hard to remember. So many years, but talk to me about the first year you pitched. I mean, you're a young kid, but I mean, did you feel any soreness in your arm after each game, or I mean, you were just so young and so
No,
fired up?
totally not. I mean, I definitely,
Yeah.
when I was 9, you play with 9 through 12-year-olds, so I definitely got shelled, but my arm was not, it was okay. And it was all the way, it was okay, mostly through college as well. So I was lucky in that regard that I never had a serious arm injury, or an elbow injury or anything like that. And that was just, I guess, my own luck. I don't think it was anything that I did with form, more just always throwing, having some elasticity in those muscles is probably goes a long way.
So the first couple of years you pitched, what would you say was the thing that you really had to adjust to the most? I mean, what would you say that you were doing that you said, you know what, I've got to learn to adapt to this? I mean, was there anything in particular?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're younger and you are a good player on a team, you can usually rely on getting the ball by people. That goes away very quickly, with fastballs down the middle kind of thing. I mean, not to say that everyone's a home run, but when you're 9 and you're pitching to a 12-year-old, it's not that fast anymore. So, you know, location. I'm not saying I don't think I would have been throwing curveballs and sliders that
Yeah.
young. It's discouraged, at that time. But that kind of thing, throwing the ball high, low, elevating, throwing balls on purpose. Kind of a foreign concept when you're 8 years old and you're just hoping to get the ball over the plate.
And now I know you were young, but did you ever, if you knew you were going to pitch that day and you're in school or you're on the way home on the bus, did you ever think about that game? Thinking about, I hope I pitch good tonight. I mean, did you ever carry that with you outside of baseball, or were you just so love playing so much you didn't really think about that stuff?
Yeah, I don't even know if we knew. I mean, in high school, when you get to that level and maybe even a little lower, you kind of have an idea if you're up, if it's your turn. Sometimes, in little league and before that, you might pitch 2 innings or 1 inning every game, and whether you're the starter, the closer, or anywhere in between, you don't really have an idea. So but once it got to high school, it was kind of like, all right, well, listen, someone else pitched on Tuesday and this person pitched on Thursday. You knew Friday was your game, kind of thing. So it definitely became more prevalent and in my mind, the higher level I got. College, even more so. I mean, it was basically set in stone when the season began.
Now, John, let me ask you, because one of the things that I think has been a problem with some of these young pitchers getting hurt a lot is I think a lot of them focus too much on baseball throughout the year. They're constantly playing it and they're pitching all the time. And I think that really does wear and tear on the arm a little bit. I mean, what is your opinion on that? I mean, would you encourage kids to play a different sport each season? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I am a proponent of it. I mean, I think that it's very easy to get burned out if you only do one thing. I played basketball, and for what it's worth, I liked basketball better. I probably wasn't better at it, but I enjoyed it more. And it was, every season was an off, a much needed break. So I would never recommend to anybody, or it's not my thought process is not to spend all of your time playing one sport the whole year around. It's an easy way to dislike it. I think taking a step away from it and then coming back to it makes you kind of appreciated why you loved it to begin with. So um, that's something that I'm glad I did.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, John, around 1995, 1996, you started playing in some travel basketball leagues. I know you played in a couple at the Boys and Girls Club. How, excuse me, how important is it for a kid who's 12 years old to play AAU, play in travel leagues, because Biddy is great and they do a great job with Biddy, but you really need to be going against other cities. And that's the only way I feel that you're going to get better. And you're also going to get to play with other kids and, kids you might eventually play with in high school. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, the game sometimes is what you make of it. I think just playing, having a ball in your hand, whether it be a baseball, basketball, football, anything, is important to get better. It's hard to imagine a world without the amount of travel AAU teams. But 30 years ago, it wasn't as common as it is now. It was a little bit more. I mean, boys club teams excluded. While those were sort of an anomaly. There wasn't as many AAU teams around now. I mean, you look around today, any given town or any given county has multiple. When I played, certain levels of basketball, we'd be based out of Hamden, New Haven, places that aren't necessarily close when you're 15, 16 years old, and need a ride every single time you have to go. But it's definitely become a more common part of the game, I think, and a more common part of learning the game. But I don't know if I would look at it as a necessary. I mean, if you have access just to a court, to a ball, or even to just pickup games, I mean, playing the game is what's going to get you better at it, whether it be among your peers, or some other organized fashion.
Did you go to a lot of camps over the years when you were a young kid for basketball? I mean, especially in the summer when they would have those different camps.
Oh yeah, I mean for both sports. I went to baseball camps, basketball camps in the summer. Shelton High School always had one. That the school or the school team ran. The coaches were kind of the coaches, and um, then other various other ones. I mean, like I said, as I got older, they had one I think at Eastern Connecticut State University, and that's when you start getting older, you start to like stay over at these things for like a week long, and I definitely did that on multiple occasions.
Right. So we mentioned earlier about your dad coaching you a little bit when you were a kid, and you had mentioned he coached your brother as well. Now I know you have a young son right now, and I notice he's been playing sports. Is that something you'd like to do eventually too? Is get involved with his sports and coach?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, maybe when he's younger. Again, it's hard to say, what the needs of any team are going to be, but I also like to kind of allow him to find his own way. I influence him enough at home, and I'm involved in his life there. I don't want him to think that I'm, every part of it,
Right.
but it's not necessarily something I'm seeking out.
Right. We talked about you mentioned you were a big Jeter Mariano fan for the Yankees, and you got to see those great Yankee teams in the late 90s, early 2000s. Just talk to me a little bit. I think you were in 8th grade at the time when the Yankees won that first title in 96. The Charlie Hayes catch. I mean, that was the Leyritz home run. It was a great comeback. Just talk about a 13-year-old kid like yourself getting to watch that team that year, because that had to be a lot of fun.
That was a great year. I mean, I specifically remember loving the '98 Yankees. I mean, I personally feel it's one of the best teams ever, if not the best. Which is, I think, the year that they played the Padres, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just, those were great years. I think back on them, thinking, my goodness, there was never going to be a team like this again. I don't I don't like to say that the Astros are flirting with that, because I cannot stand that team. But that said, they're also good. But yeah, that was an amazing run, and obviously as a fan, it brings you closer to the game. It feels like you want it to be as important to you as it is to the players on those teams.
And as someone, John, that you played baseball in college, so you have an idea of playing in big pressure spots and things like that. But how do you like today's game? Because they really focus a lot on analytics. I'm not crazy about it. I've always said, as a Yankee fan, I feel like the Yankees focus on that too much. What is your opinion of analytics?
I mean, it's just seems like it's a different way to look at the game that I don't necessarily know if it's better or not. I mean, it seems like when you have a long season like this, with so many games, 162 games, the same teams or the best teams are always going to find their way, regardless of if they have a down month or 2 months, because you have time to make it up. So I look at it more like, who's got the least injuries of the good teams, right? I mean, that's the thing now is I feel like there's a lot more players that end up on the DL, a lot more players that miss time than used to be. And I don't know if that's a change in the game or just a change in players' willingness to play through pain or a change in the league protocols regarding, things like concussions and how many complete games are 9 inning games are thrown by a pitcher in any year. I mean, it feels less and less common as time goes by, where you've got these, you know, 5 innings, 6 innings, and then there's 3, 4 relievers, and that's every game. So,
Yeah. And you're seeing guys come out of the game with no hitters. They're coming out after
yeah,
the 6th inning, which is just mind boggling. It really is.
yeah. I mean, they're very cognizant of pitch counts and, how many pitches has this pitcher thrown as their maximum in the past. And, you know, I know guys like Nolan Ryan dislike it. I mean, they literally cannot stand watching pitchers anymore because they just think that they're soft or however you want to classify it. But I mean, there's a lot of pitchers getting Tommy John surgery. I mean, maybe that has to do with the upbringing, right? And maybe that has to do with throwing
Yeah.
too many innings too soon in life because you didn't play another sport or because you played 78 games in a season playing AAU. I mean, I don't know, but it's definitely shifting towards, they want the game to be more shorter games, use more pitchers. I mean, they're changing the rules to make it so the game is faster. So,
Yeah. Time will tell where it goes from here, but I just haven't been too crazy about it, but we'll see what happens. So, the first taste of success, John, you were in Little League and you were part of the Shelton National State Championship team. So just talk about that experience a little bit.
it's an unforgettable one, and things, memories fade, as you get older. I was 11 at the time. And that was something that even still I can remember much of it vividly. The teams we played, the dorm room we kind of stayed in with 15 bunk beds in it or whatever it was, and just being there for this period of time, sleeping over every night, practicing, playing. It was incredible, you know. And I still see. I mean, a lot of the guys that were on that team were in my class, but I still see some of them. You know, some of them, many times a year. Some I'm still friends with today.
Right. And I think about, I believe, I can't remember if it was Roger Clemens. It was either Roger Clemens or Tom Seaver. They said it years ago. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what type of team it is. Whenever you win a championship, if it's little league, high school, college, whatever, pros, it's something special. And I mean, that's probably something to this day. I mean, you don't think about it all the time, but you're still proud of that accomplishment.
No, very, very much so. I mean, you drive into town and there's like a sign for it, rusted and faded, nearly 30 years in hindsight, but still there. And like I said, it's happened since, but to my knowledge, we were the first Shelton national team that did it. They recently, well, I say recently, but it was probably a couple of years ago now, had a dedication for the coaches of that team, George Burr, Carl DeProfio, Tony Mingrone, and those men made their impact on that league, but also they were the coaches of that team. I mean, they
Yeah.
continued on in the program long after we were gone, doing great things for other kids. But that was an impressive thing. And the other the thing about that team and that season for us was that it was sort of unexpected. I mean, you never know really how good you are until you start winning at that age because you don't have any concept, right? I mean, it's not like we're scouting, you know, other teams. We have some concept of some of the good local players, but beyond that, you're kind of like going into every game blind almost. And so that's kind of what makes it fun. You're like, wow, we actually can do this. That feeling is something that I don't forget either.
And now were you able to pitch in any of those
No,
tournament?
I didn't pitch on that team. I was a pitcher in the league, but
Right.
I played outfield for that team, and that was pretty much it.
Right. So, John, let me ask you, as far as basketball goes, eighth grade, I think you played for the Shelton intermediate team, first year playing on the school team. And I mean, I think of some of the guys you played with. I could think of Adrian Lena, who was a very good player. This kid's gonna, this name's gonna escape me. It'll come to me eventually. Was Matt pivotal around then, or
Yeah,
yeah,
Matt was 2 years older, but so I didn't play with him in eighth grade, but I played with him in high school, and then
right. So just talk to me about playing on the eighth grade team. I mean, did you feel that year really was beneficial to you and preparing you for your high school career?
yeah, I mean, I did not get a lot of playing time on that. I was maybe a late bloomer, or maybe just needed a growth spurt, which all came later. But it might have been an awakening of kind of what I had to do to get better. You know, um, I could always shoot, but there was a lot more to the game than that. So, that those years, sort of post eighth grade, freshman year of high school, both physically and mentally, were pivotal for me and becoming, the player I would be later in high school.
Yeah. And the thing of it is, too, John, you talked about it, just you touched on it a couple seconds ago. The growth spur doesn't happen a lot. And a lot of times, what happens is, and this is why I always say, you can never compare freshman teams to varsity teams when kids are freshmen and then they're seniors, because a lot of the kids don't grow right away freshman year. And then by the time they get to be seniors, they've hit that spurt and they're a lot uh, taller and they're better teams at that point. So you never could say, oh, well, we beat them freshman year, we'll beat them senior year. It doesn't work that way.
No, not even close. I mean, the difference between a 13, 14-year-old and a 17, 18-year-old is night and day. So it's never even close to make that comparison. People, like you say, grow. People come into their own sort of physicality more as they get older, lift weights, just maturing in general. I mean, you can never know what someone's going to look like in 2 3 years and base your decision about their play style or skill level, on that alone.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about freshman basketball because while you didn't get a lot of playing time your eighth grade year, freshman year you were on the court a lot. And I do recall, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, you had a 40-point game one game your freshman year, which was just unbelievable. I mean, it seemed like every time you took a shot, the ball went in. So just talk about that freshman team. And I mean, did you feel confident after that freshman season that you were ready to take the next step?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's when I kind of got the sense that, like, this is going upward, not plateauing. But it took a lot of work, right? I mean, I'm not fast naturally, and I got faster, and I don't think by any stretch I would be considered quick. But I had a lot to make up for in that regard, and a lot to catch up with in that regard. But definitely, that was a successful year for me on the court, 40-point game, and a lot of other high scoring games, and so I kind of felt, what, I'm moving in the right direction, for to go forward, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
And John, I kind of look at you, and we talked about the Yankees before, and one guy that I always felt you were similar with, as far as your tenacity and the type of work ethic you put in and how you want to be the best you could be, is Paul O'Neill, because you both were always your worst critics. I mean, you were always hard on yourself. You could score 32 points, but if you missed a few shots, that's all you were thinking about that whole game. And O'Neill could be 3 for 4, but he's thinking about that one time he struck out. What was it about when you were competing that you were so driven that even when you had a great game, if there were those little things you didn't feel you did well, you were hard on yourself about?
I mean, that's just the mentality you have to continue to improve. Right? I mean, if you are satisfied with a performance, that means you think it was perfect. And I can assure you and me and anyone else, there's very rarely a perfect performance in any sport ever. So I mean, that's sort of what you got to look to the gaps and try to fill them. So the next time, even if you don't improve everything, there's a step in the right direction towards a better result. Even if you won, even if you had 30, even if you made every shot, there's things that can be done differently, and that was a motivating factor for me. Then to be better, to be the best, to show that I could do this, or be on this team, or take that next step.
Right. And the good thing about basketball and baseball for that matter is, especially at the high school level, you're definitely playing at least 2 games a week in basketball, and baseball, usually three. So even if you have a rough game, you got the opportunity a day or two later to come back and you could have a great game. And it's like your week could start off bad, but it could end good. So, I mean, that was always the positive about playing so many games a week because you always had the chance to kind of redeem yourself.
Yeah, yeah, the turnaround time is quick, right? I mean, you can shake off a bad performance, like you said, if with basketball 2 games a week, baseball even more quickly. You go 0 for 4 in one game, you're hopefully back in the lineup, but when you are, the slate is clean.
Right. So, John, one thing that's always been involved in the game of basketball, and I mean, I know kids aren't crazy about it when it's happening. There's a lot of running that goes into it. I mean, there's times you got to do touch and goes a bunch of times. You're always running because they want to keep your endurance, ready for you when you're out there playing. But how important do you think it is, the conditioning part of basketball, and why it's so important to constantly be doing these running drills all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's invaluable, right? I mean, it's for me, I was again not the fastest, got faster, worked hard at it. I had asthma when I was growing up, so that was something that I had to overcome. But as I had a growth spurt, it went away, it faded. That allowed it to be a lot easier for me to do the various running drills. But I mean, it's a game of constant movement. So, if you look at it from that regard, in order to move for the entire game, you have to practice. You have to be in shape to be able to do that. I mean, the muscles you use in basketball are unlike the muscles you use in anything else: the running, the jumping, the stop, the go. So it's something that if you're not doing it, it's going to be very difficult out there to breathe, move for a long period of time.
Right. And John, you're talented at so many things, but you have a hidden talent that maybe, I mean, obviously your close friends and family know about, but people who just saw you play wouldn't know this about you. You are one of the funniest people I've ever met, and you have that quick wit. And I can think of one time, and I always tell kids about it today because it just cracks me up. I think you were a freshman or sophomore in high school, and you walked from the high school to home, whatever the case was, and I remember saying to you, I go, why didn't you just ask for a ride, man? Somebody would have picked you up. And you respond with, it's okay. I benefited from that. And I go, how? I got exercise. So, I mean, you have that wit, that
Yeah,
quick wit about you. So, I mean, and I think that's important too when you're playing sports, because a lot of times sports, it can be demanding. You're not always going to have a great day. So I think when you're loose like that and you're making everybody laugh, that just relaxes the team in general.
yeah. I mean, I might be. I got a little too quick with the refs every now and again, also, or umps when you're pitching. But yeah, I mean, it's the lighter side of who I am, it always shines through. So on the court sometimes, or on the mound especially, you get a lot more time to think out there than you do when you're running up and down the court out of breath, typically, as I was. So but yes, I appreciate you saying that though, because I know you and I have had some funny moments over the years.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, we could write a whole book. So let me ask you, John, freshman year of baseball, you obviously pitched, correct?
Hmm. You know what? I don't remember.
Right.
Um, I think so, but I don't have that good of a memory of what freshman baseball was like. I know I played outfield a lot as well, and maybe some third base, but I don't recall if I pitched or not. I know I pitched junior and senior year, um, but I just don't remember.
Now, as much as you loved pitching, I mean, did you enjoy hitting a lot as well?
Yeah,
You think?
yeah. I mean, was it something I should have worked at harder? Absolutely. It's just as I said, I was very passionate about basketball. I just enjoyed the game, the playing of the game, the itself. So while I also loved baseball, I definitely dedicated more attention to basketball during my high school days, and it wasn't until college that I, sort of gave in to the fact that I should still be playing this. And it was nice to be part of an organized sport in college. I will say, even though it was, Division 3 baseball. I mean, it wasn't, nobody was getting drafted. No one was, expecting to play beyond that. That camaraderie and that sort of, having that regiment of being on a team was important for me in college.
Right. Now, John, I believe weights are very important when it comes to baseball. I mean, you definitely have to be in the weight room to get bigger and stronger. But let me ask you, do you think it benefits you in basketball as well? Because I really believe that for someone who's a forward or even a guard, being in the weight room helps in that sense that it gets you tougher. You're a lot more physical. I mean, what is your opinion on weightlifting as far as basketball and baseball go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important if done right. I mean, you're dealing with a game of muscle memory, though, right? So, I mean, if you're lifting a lot, I felt I always needed to lift and then like shoot a bunch after that. Like, don't forget what it feels like, even though the ball weighs like an ounce now. Just remember what a foul shot feels like. That's the one thing that I, never wanted to do was lift too much to where the game became foreign, or I was too big, or I didn't remember what it was supposed to feel like to shoot from X distance, or, did a lot of legs. I always felt that that was important, especially for pitching. If you're on the mound, you're pushing off. You want to, have a strong sort of core and legs. So that was something I always focused on.
Right. So talk to me about sophomore year basketball, John. I believe it was Coach Sedlock's 10th season already, and he established himself as a very good coach. He won a couple of Housatonic League championships. And now, mind you, John, when Coach Sedlock started out coaching, they were still in the old Hoosie, and now you guys are playing in the SCC, which there are no nights off. Every team you play, it's a tough game. There, like I said, it's the competition is great. You're talking about Wilbur-Cross, Hill House, Amity, Career. I mean, uh, you know, um, North Haven, schools like that. So just talk to me about that first year playing for Coach Sedlock. I mean, what was the one thing you noticed about him going in right away?
That I felt he ran us to death. That was my that was my initial reaction. Like, what are we doing here? I thought we were playing basketball. This is not cross country. But that was definitely something that hindsight being 2020 was obviously important. I mean, there was playing teams like Wilbercross and other teams would have up years and down years too, whether it be Amity and the Wallingford teams, Cheshire. I mean, it was always sort of jumbled on who was at the top. And to compete with those teams, I mean, listen, when we were there and I was in high school, we weren't the biggest team or the strongest team or the fastest, so we had to train to kind of make up for it. And that's an initial impression that I had, is that I don't think I'm ever going to be able to breathe again, or feel my legs again. But you know we obviously made it through.
And that year, John, you played a lot of JV, but you also saw some varsity time. I mean, there were times Coach Sedlock would put you in early in the game, sometimes as early as the first quarter, but he always gave you some playing time. I mean, did you feel, I don't want to say satisfied because you're never satisfied, but did it make you feel good to know that he was putting you out there, because that shows that number one, he's seeing something in practice, but he's also seeing what you're doing in the JV games, that he's allowing you to play some varsity.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was hungry for as much playing time as I can get at the varsity level, and I was glad to get what I got. And would I have wanted more? Sure, but at the end of the day, we had at that point in time, some, a core of seniors who were on the team that played the majority of the game, and I don't think I deserved more playing time than I got, and it was, like I said, another good learning experience that year. to kind of be ready to step into the fold in my junior year as a starter.
One of your teammates throughout your 4 years, John, and you got to play with him. And I thought he was one of the most underrated defensive players because he was outstanding on defense. And that was your cousin, Donnie Sheehy.
Yeah.
Um, Talk about getting to play with him and just talk about how invaluable he was to that team, especially on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you have to know about Don is that, well, like you said, he's my cousin, but he had started or at least been getting significant playing time since he was a freshman. So, at that point in time, he had already been kind of seasoned. So, I mean, he knew how to play the game. He was, athletic, quick, tenacious on both sides of the ball. So, I mean, for the 4 years, because we were the same grade, it was sort of our floor leader, at least from ball handling, defense, that point of view.
Right. And just talk about, again, I touched on it earlier about the different teams you play, the Hill Houses, Wilbur Crosses, Cheshires, Amities, all these great schools. I mean, just talk about how the league was, it had like a talent in that league that you just can't explain. I mean, there were just so many good teams in that SCC.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it almost felt strange at times, right? I mean, we would play Brantford and Madison, Guilford, Xavier. I mean, these aren't necessarily close schools to play against, and Fairfield Prep. And that's just the way it was. And I think if my recollection serves, the draw that you had in the league was based on kind of the records of the teams the year before. So if you did well in your division, you played the teams that did well in their division, whether it be the Housatonic or the Hammonasset or the various divisions that were in it. You'd kind of play the top two teams from there. So, if we were coming off a good year or even a decent year in the Hoosie, we were playing against the teams that did well in the other divisions. So that, for better or worse, turned out to be Hillhouse Cross, you know, Xavier a lot of the time.
Right. But I also think that not only for yourself, but for the whole team, it made you guys better. When you're playing against competition like that, your game rises above everything else as well because you're playing against such talented teams that you step your game up a notch each each team that you play like that.
Yeah, I mean that's you kind of the hope being that you don't have a down game against the teams you should be, right? I mean it's easy to go into a game as an underdog and well we thought you were going to lose by 20 but you only lost by 6 and it's still a loss. It's so while we had some success in those games against some of those teams, but the worst feeling is when there's a team that you should be the 20-point favorite against, and you either only win by 4 or lose because you equally play down as you've played up in other games against better teams.
Right. So talk about baseball your sophomore year. You played for Eddie Morocco, who I was looking back on his career. I don't think there were many times that guy missed the tournament. He was always making the tournament. He won a few Housatonic League championships, and he always had tremendous players. I mean, he coached a lot of great players, a lot of them who played in college. But just talk about that first year, getting to know his system of baseball. I mean, did you enjoy it?
He was an acquired taste, I mean, and I loved Coach Morocco. Don't get me wrong. God rest his soul. But when you are 14, 15 years old, his demeanor was not all that palatable for us at that age. I mean, he grew on us and we came to love him. But I will tell you right now that it was difficult at first, adjusting to sort of the the turns of phrase that he would use to essentially tell you that you sucked. Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine that. Um, Going into your junior year, John, I mean, did Coach Sedlock express to you at all that he had big plans for you on that team? I mean, you did start that year, but I mean, did you know going in, like, I'll say the summer, did you have an idea in the summer that you were going to be in the mix your junior year?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if nothing else, I mean, as a junior, there was only maybe one or two seniors on the team at all. it was sort of a gap year in the program. So with all the people that had graduated that were 2 years ahead of me, it was sort of no doubt that myself, Don, others who were sophomores to be juniors were going to have the bulk of the playing time that year, and it was just a matter of who was going to step up the most.
Right.
So we do.
And it was a big year for you, John. And I remember the first couple games you struggled a little bit. I know you had mentioned to me at the time there was one game I think you only scored 7 points. You were really down on yourself, and then you just came out, and the team was 0-2 at the time, and you came out there, and I wish I could recall the team, but you scored about 26 points, and I really felt that once you had that game, your confidence was there, and you really took off the rest of that junior season. There were many times that year that you scored over 20 points. I mean, did you feel confident that whole season that you were playing up to your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, it was a breakout for me. Again, I had played minimally as a sophomore, so to have success where you basically, maybe see, 2, 3 minutes of time a game, sporadically, to shoot foul shots in a foul situation or something like that, versus basically playing the whole game and scoring that many points was a drastic change for me, just mentally and I relished it, but at the same time, I did miss the first 3 games of that season actually. So,
Oh, okay.
by the time I played my first game, or I was already, um, it was already the fourth game of the season. I had turned my ankle in a scrimmage, um, and that kept me out for the beginning of the season, unfortunately. And but then after that, I just kind of got healthy and just sort of hit the ground running with with the team.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys really played well that year. I mean, like I said, you had a tremendous year that season, and it just looked like to me that you were really coming into your own. And I mean, you probably aren't thinking about it at the time, but I mean, it's probably something that it's a message you could send to your son or any kid is that it doesn't matter what it matters how you play when you're younger, obviously, but don't get discouraged if you're not getting a lot of playing time on a seventh or eighth grade team because, as you mentioned, you didn't play a lot on that eighth grade team, and here you are as a junior starting, and not only starting, John, but you're playing for a school that, if my memory is right, has 2,000 kids in it, and that's not easy to play to see a lot of playing time in a sport like basketball where they've had a rich tradition of success in that sport and be able to be a starter. So I mean, you had to be proud of yourself looking back on it.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of the goal. I mean, all the times where I didn't play a lot, or like I said, eighth grade, minimal playing time. It was just, it doesn't hurt that I, kind of went from 5'10" to 6'3", in months or a year. So that's part of it as well. But it was kind of like that. This was why we did it. I'm
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking about I had a guest on not too long ago, and he told me when he played for Ansonia, one of the things his coach told him was take advantage of using your hands. That was big for him. What was one of the things that Coach Sedlock stressed to you a lot that you would use a lot in the game?
so, geez, where does one begin? Um, uh, I don't know. It's hard to recall any one specific thing. I mean, we were a group of guys, my junior and senior year that had played together for pretty much our whole lives. So there was a familiarity with each other's games that kind of carried through, Sedlock or not. We knew kind of where each other were going to be on the court and what we needed to do to succeed. Like I said, these weren't people that I just knew from high school. These were people that I knew all the way back to when I first started playing basketball, and we kind of stayed together throughout. And so I think that again, it's never easy to coach high school kids, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
it's when you have a core understanding of each other's games that you've lived with for the preceding 8, 9 years. It's a lot easier to make that work when you don't have to kind of introduce everyone to each other all over again.
Right. So, John, talk to me about some of the teammates you played with over the years, especially in high school. I mean, who were some of the teammates that you really enjoyed playing with?
Yeah, I mean, the people that I'm talking about specifically, you mentioned Don Sheehy, you mentioned Adrian, and then there was Tom Wood and Chris Garrity. So those were kind of the guys that we were all the same age. We had all played together for a very long time, um, and continued to play together, through our senior year. And like I said, we knew each other, so that made it a lot easier. It made it a lot more fun too, for what it's worth.
Right. So, after missing 3 games because of the ankle injury, and you come back, you have a good year. I mean, were you very optimistic that you were going to have a great senior year, and were you satisfied with your play your junior season?
Yeah, I mean, to me, getting accolades, being named for certain awards, averaging a certain amount of points. I mean, it was not anything I was like, yeah, this is a guarantee. I know this is going to happen. I mean, I was almost as surprised as anyone to, have done as well. Um, Only because it probably to some, including myself, came out of nowhere. I
Yeah.
was basically a non-factor the year before, and then I'm, scoring 17, 18 points a game the very next season, and people were like, who is this? Who is this kid who transferred? Like, oh no, I actually went here the whole time. That's kind of the feeling that I had at the time. And then after that year of success, going into senior year, I definitely felt, if I, even if I, I need to just a couple small steps, and I'm way ahead of where I ever thought I would be.
And think about this, John, because you mentioned that you didn't get much playing time sophomore year. So in 2 years, you had a total of 950 points in your career. So if you do the math, that's almost 500 points a season. So to have close to 500 points junior and senior year, I mean, that says a lot about who you are as an athlete because that's not easy to do, especially when you're playing in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I look back and say, what if I played those 3 games?
Yeah.
That's the moral to that story. But no, I know. I mean, it's even looking back on it, when you say it that way, it seems like a great feat, and it is. Like I said, I'm proud of it. Never got to 1,000, but you know, it's just a number, really.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to me about junior season because you did pitch a little bit, correct?
Yes, yes,
Right. So
we were
go ahead.
very good that year. That team was very good.
Yeah.
Um, we had some players on that team that could hit, and we won games and went pretty far. And we, got beat in the state tournament, sort of got upset in the state tournament. I mean, I think we were like 18-2 in the regular season that year, and I think we lost to a Cheshire team that we beat twice during the regular season, if I recall correctly, and handily too. I don't know that they were better, but they were better that day. And that was an unfortunate way to end it, because I think we won the SEC that year at I don't even know what it's called now, but it used to be like where the Raven Stadium is, um, over there, against Notre Dame West Haven, and that Notre Dame West Haven team was very good that year as well. They had D1 players like at multiple positions, and we did too. So it was that was a bloodbath, and it was good games. And I wasn't the ace on that team, but definitely pitched some games down the stretch that were meaningful for the team. So
Yeah. And that's the thing about baseball, John, especially, is you could be 18-2 and you could beat a team twice and you could even beat them good. But one thing about baseball, a pitcher could get hot or a pitcher could be off one day. The team could get hot hitting wise. So it's never a given that you're going to run away with a game in baseball. It just doesn't happen.
no, it doesn't, and it's even more so when it's just one game. I mean, there's no 4 out of 7 here where you kind of get the chance to make up for that one stinker. That doesn't happen, right? I mean, you're in done, and that's the end of it. And if you happen to have a bad game, it doesn't matter who you're playing. You don't hit, and they get a couple big hits. That's sometimes the difference. So that's kind of what happened to us there.
Right. So talk to me about senior year of basketball, John. It was a big year for you. I think you averaged about 24 points a game. You were selected to the all area team. for both the Register and Connecticut Post. Not to mention you were all SCC, if I remember correctly. And the thing about that senior season that was so strange is this is where I look at how matchups really tell the story in basketball, because that year you guys beat Career twice. Career beat Amity twice, and Amity beat you guys twice. And I think the three of you all had a share of the SCC tie, or at least the Whoosie part. So, I mean, that was like an unbelievable year of basketball between those three schools because you guys brought out the best in each other every game.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly what happened, and I didn't remember that until you said it, but now that you say it, I do remember that to be the case because it was sort of a round robin of we have this team's number and we match up better, and this team has our number and they match up better, and that's exactly right. I don't know why that was the case, but for whatever happened, we all ended up kind of beating each other twice, as you said, and shared that. And I appreciate that picture that you put up there of me with my dyed hair. You have to remember that was like 2000, 2001. So,
Yeah.
now if, I would, you know, hindsight's 2020 is what I'll say.
And those teams, those Amity teams, those career teams, they had unbelievable talent. I remember Amity had that kid. I'm going to say his name wrong, but Pakaitis or whatever his name was, Marty. He was a tremendous player.
Yeah, Jeremy.
Um, Jeremy, I'm sorry, Jeremy Pakai. And career. I mean, career came on fast because they kind of came onto the scene in like 1998, and within 3 years, that program was unbelievable. So I mean, just the talent that was in that league that year was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a good year, and I mean, we were good. We were okay. I mean, it's when and unfortunately, there were other equally talented teams that year because we had high hopes. We had kind of the same core of guys coming in, and while we had a better record, I don't know that it was as good as we would have liked. But I mean, we had some tough games in there. I mean, teams like Wilbur Cross and Hillhouse and Bunnell, who we played, and are never going to be easy matchups. I mean, they always have talent, and for us, we weren't big. I mean, I don't know how tall our tallest player was, but it might have been me. So it's we were not going to have a 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" center to sort of be an anchor on a team. We were going to have to run. We were going to have to gun a little bit, and that strategy fails sometimes, no matter how good you are.
Right. And for you personally, John, it's always about the team, but individual stats do matter. And like I said, you averaged 24 points a game that year. You also played in the All-Star game that year, which is a great accomplishment. And you were selected all area, which is very hard to do. I mean, you're talking about in the area, the talent that is in there is unbelievable. So, I mean, for a kid who started off not, one of the best players, you ended up one of the best players in the state, and you were one of the best basketball players that Shelton High School's ever had. So that had to, looking back on it, feel like a real big accomplishment for you that you kind of cemented your legacy as a Shelton High School basketball player that year.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. I mean, that was what I'd been kind of uh, training for, working hard at. Like I said, the shooting in the rain, shooting in the snow thing. I mean, I say that from experience, not from just
Yeah.
making up a hypothetical scenario. So that it was a great year for me personally, for both sports, for what it's worth. I mean, for baseball, it was even a little more shocking, and I'm sure you'll get to that. But for basketball, I had high hopes, and I think I, you know, played as well as I could have and fulfilled all the goals that I had. We played well that year. We won a lot of games. I know we got you know beat up pretty badly by Weaver up in Hartford, but I mean they had a Division One player on their team who just ran circles around us, and that's the way it goes sometimes. But but yeah, I was very pleased with the season that I had that year, and look back at it fondly.
Right. And it was one of the best seasons I've ever seen a Shelton High School basketball player have. And, you were rewarded not only, like I said, with all area, all whoosy, the 24 points a game and things like that, making the All Star team and playing in it. But you were also selected or chosen by Coach Sedlock and his staff as the team's MVP that year. And again, that has to be an unbelievable feeling because it is a team game and you pulled your weight for that team and they felt that you were the MVP and that had to just be something that you're very proud of.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, um, when you talk about where I came from, eighth grade, not a sliver of playing time that I could meaningfully remember. To that, in that 4 year span, among the same people, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's not like it's a competition internally, but I mean, you measure yourself against your peers, right? So, to see to kind of surpass the people that used to be ahead of you is also a satisfying feeling, as a personal accomplishment.
Right. And then just when you think you can't top yourself, the baseball season comes. You get to play in the All Star game statewide for baseball. And again, you're chosen team MVP that year. And you talked about it. Coach Morocco wasn't an easy ride in the beginning. But with that said, he appreciated the talent you had and what you provided to the team. And again, think about this. Like I go back to it, a school with 2,000 kids in it. It's a big school, a lot of kids in your class, and it's not easy to see the court or see the field. And yet you're chosen basketball MVP and baseball MVP. To me, those mean more to me than you making all area or anything else because that's your school you're representing, and that says a lot about you.
Yeah, I think that Coach Morocco was probably as surprised as anybody that I turned out to be the MVP that year. I mean, I wasn't a captain. I probably wasn't even in the consideration to be a captain. And I don't even recall that I was in like a starter to begin the year. And then it just all clicked between pitching, I mean, hitting, and I to have received that, I will say, was somewhat of a surprise. We had very good players on that team. Joe Smaraglino, Matt Memoli. I mean, these were good baseball players. So to have received that, that almost felt more special to me because I not to say that I ever expect anything, but for basketball, it was kind of clear that I was, taking, monstrous steps forward, and for baseball, it was more of a how did this happen? And again, I just it all came together at the right time for us. We were a very good team that year too, and I was happy and proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely was a very good team and two great years that you had in Shelton baseball. I mean, you were on unbelievable teams. I mean, you can't ask for anything better than that. And I mean, again, the fact that you weren't even sure you were going to start that year and then you have the season you do says a lot about you. And if I'm not mistaken, too, you mentioned Matt. He was a close friend throughout baseball, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Matt, we weren't in the same grade, but we were very close in high school.
Right.
I mean, we were in the same group of friends. And like I said, he was a tremendous, tremendous baseball player. I think he played at Central eventually. And he could just hit. He could flat out hit.
Yeah.
So and he had a great season that year. I mean, and
Right.
maybe he deserved it, but the maybe the sentiment of give it to a senior was riding through with Coach Morocco when he had to make that decision, knowing that Matt was coming back for another year. I don't know, but he was a great player either way.
Right. And I mean, as far as sports goes, you win those two team MVPs. It's a great way to graduate high school, and you were an outstanding student as well, John. And I think that says that's what stands out to me more than anything else because what you do on the court on the field is awesome, but you really have to, make sure you're getting it done in the classroom. And you were always an outstanding student. I mean, you always did what you needed to do in class, and you were a hard worker. So I mean, that's even more impressive to me is what you would do in the classroom than what you did as an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to be as well-rounded as possible, but my parents made clear, my family made clear, my grandparents, as well, growing up, that this was the most important thing. Um, so I treated it as such, and I always worked very hard in school, and it was always very important to me. And I'm trying to teach those same values to my own children, And I hope it carries over the same. But yes, I mean it was always school first for what it's worth, despite all the accolades and success in sports. You know, it was very clear to me that through my parents that it was scholastics were one, and then everything else was two.
Right. So talk to me about playing in both those all-star games for basketball and baseball. What was that like?
It was pretty amazing. I mean, by that time, end of senior year, I played in some serious camps over the summer. I've been to some places. You get exposure to some pretty good players, but it's pretty amazing to see everyone in the same place. I think they hold it at a central location like Maloney High School or something like that in Meriden or whatever that is, and it's pretty great. I mean, you kind of get to see people you played against, and you get to play with them, and you kind of get to exploit their strengths. And this guy can jump, this guy can, this guy, has, is 6'10", kind of play among people that you would never get the chance otherwise. Same with baseball. Although I will say, the one thing I do remember about the baseball All-Star game, while I don't remember where it is that like a lot of the guys were like going on to play in the summer and had all this thing. I think I had to throw like an inordinate amount of innings in that game just because everyone else had like pitching obligations. I'm like, I'm getting rocked in this game. This is a really bad showing for me here, but nobody else wanted to throw. I'm like, all right, well, I'll just go through underhand a few more so you guys can hit it out, and I'll never play again. Thank you.
So, John, what were your plans when you went off to Bates College? I know that you played baseball all 4 years, but did you want to play basketball, or did you just plan to go to school and whatever happened with sports, you would decide, but you wanted to focus more so on the academic side?
Yeah, so I picked the school or the group of schools that I was choosing on academics first. So Bates was among a group of schools that I was looking at, like Middlebury, Bowdoin, all of the same kind of ilk, Connecticut College, all kind of from the NESCAC conference. And actually, the intent was to play basketball. I actually was recruited by the coach at Bates, went there to play, and it just wasn't fun anymore. I walked onto the baseball team with zero recruiting just to be able to engage like in a team sport still. I'd been used to it. It was part of the structure of my life, and it was something that I wanted to continue doing. But basketball, for whatever reason, just wasn't fun. It was just maybe a combination of the people that were there, plus the people that were no longer there, right? I mean, as I said before, I'd played with the same people for a really long time. And that's not to say that the game was only fun because of them, but it was a lot more fun, with them than without. And maybe that change I just think wasn't for me at the college level. I mean, it was Maine. It's not like I was in Australia, but being away from home, it just wasn't fun for me anymore. So I gave that up and walked onto the baseball team, and a lot of the guys from that baseball team are still some of my closest college friends today. So, but to go back to your question, it was an academics first decision. Sports was secondary, um, and only by the ability for me to just walk onto the team did I even play any sport in college.
Right. And now you came out of the bullpen most of your career at Bates, correct?
Just my sophomore year, my junior and senior year, I actually got hurt a little bit my senior year, so I didn't throw as many games. But I was a starter my junior year, which was always the goal.
Right.
And I also played a lot during those summers. Still playing like West Haven Twilight League and things like that, like pretty highly competitive. And that was it. So I did pitch, and that was all I did there. Once you get to the college level, they kind of one position, and that's it.
And it's kind of ironic, John, because you said this a few times during this interview that basketball was always your number one, baseball was always your number two, but you ended up playing college baseball and seemed to enjoy baseball more in college than you did basketball. So even though basketball started number one, and it's probably still number one in a lot of ways, you probably in the college years really loved baseball more, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
and that was people driven. I mean, I for no other reason. I mean, we weren't good. The team was not that good. I mean, we had a pretty good year my junior year, where we kind of overperformed and won a lot of games that maybe either we shouldn't have or just played well. I mean, played our best in a lot of games. A lot of teams don't play their best every game. We played our best in the games that we needed to, and won a lot of games that year. But it was the, that was the thing about that. The guys on the team there were, not only great teammates, but now are great friends. So maybe that, like I said, the camaraderie of a team and the relationships that you have with players and friendships you formed there was something that was most important to me, and the best thing that came out of that. Because, like I said, we stunk.
Right. And let me ask you, John, have you taken your kids to any Bates baseball games? Because I mean, you did play there. It's your school. I mean, have you gotten to take your daughter and son to any of that stuff
Not
lately?
yet, not yet. Probably will when they come down here, though. I know that they play Trinity and
Yeah.
some of the teams down here. It's during the school year. Going up to Maine in that area is not really practical for our lives right now. But definitely when they have a little bit more appreciation for it, and have some concept of what Bates is, outside of like horrific news regarding Lewiston as of recently, then I definitely will take them, um, to a game when they're local.
And John, the work ethic that you demonstrated throughout your life is the thing that really makes you who you are. And I mean, school ended, you went to law school. I mean, you're very successful today. I mean, you're doing great things in your life. And I just think I attribute that all to the fact that you never were the type of guy to settle for anything but your very best. You were not that person that was just going to be content with doing this or doing that. You're always challenging yourself to do different things and to better yourself. I mean, would you say that's like a big part of who you are, is that you have that motivation to, make the most of life?
Yeah, I mean it is. I don't know where it comes from or why, but I definitely do have that kind of drive. I mean, it's those kinds of challenges after college, after sports, law school, my career now. I mean, they're a lot harder than all of those things combined. Sports wise. I mean, to that looking back on that, it's why I can look at back at it so fondly, because it is a breath of fresh air, in a life that's filled with a lot more stressors than back then.
Right. So, John, let me ask you. It's hard to pick one thing, but what would you say the most rewarding thing about basketball and baseball was for you? I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the wins and losses or the accolades and stuff like that. But What's the most rewarding thing you got out of both those sports?
Hmm. I mean, for me personally, at the personal level, the one thing I think that organized sports and games like basketball and baseball teach you is, kind of like discipline, I guess. And I mean that term broadly, not like in a punishment kind of way, like you need to be disciplined, more like, it teaches you things like, sportsmanship and how to lose. I think learning how to lose is an important thing, because that part of sports doesn't go away in life, right? I mean, there are things that are failures in everyone's life. And if you've encountered them before, if you've lived through them before in the setting of sports, you have some familiarity with how to fail. And I think that, one thing that a lot of people don't know how to do is fail, and
Yeah.
realize it's not going to end their life.
Right, exactly. So before we go, John, what would you say to the kids out there right now that are freshmen in high school and they want to be good at soccer, good at basketball, football, baseball, softball, whatever it might be, and they're striving to get to that next level? What advice would you give them?
Besides learn to fail. No, the I think the simplest advice that I can give to anybody at that stage would be a gym rat if you want to be better, or be a field rat. Do it. You know what I mean? Nobody ever got better not doing something. So I mean, if you have access to a place, go shoot, go, kick goals, go shoot slap shots, go throw the football, go kick field goals, whatever it is. You can't get better at it if you're not doing it. So use the time that you have wisely if you really want to get better at something. I know there's a lot more distractions now, for kids, especially like technology wise, than we had. It was either go outside or read a book, for most of my childhood. and I did choose both, but I went outside a lot. So that's what I would say to kids now. You're not going to get better just hoping you get better at something. You got to do it. It was an honor and a privilege for me to be here and talk with you for an hour plus.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And thank you. And best of luck going forward. Well, folks, there you have it. I mean, I've known this man for over 25 years. He's one of the funniest human beings I've ever met. He's one of the smartest people in life. And those things are impressive, and those are an important part of our everyday lives. But I think the thing that stands out to me the most about John Rivas is the commitment he has, like I said, to be the best he could be at everything he does. He never settles for second best, and that's not a bad thing. And he's not afraid to fail as well, because in life we're going to fail sometimes. But John Rivas' attitude every day is, I'm going to make the most of life no matter what it is. And he has done that all the time. He's the type of person that we could really look up to and strive to be, because he has all his priorities with everything he does. You know, they say this: success is not an elevator. You must climb stair by stair. Well, it's safe to say that John Rivas has made it to the top of those stairs. For Hometown Heroes, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.